Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show People of Distinction. The talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com today for more info, or you can always email me directly through benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Dr. Albert Yurvati. We're going to be discussing his amazing book, This to Me. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com, pretty much all the regular online book resellers. But people, if you want to gather everything that Dr. Yurvati has in store, well, you got to go to his personal website. It's yurvatibooks.com. There, you're going to find more information on Dr. Yurvati himself, more information on this fantastic book. But get this, people, this to me is actually a continuation. It's a second book. The first one was called Wet My Hands, both of which, as I mentioned, available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but of course through his personal website, yurvatibooks.com. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Dr. Yurvati was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And people, you already know I'm talking about Writers Branding. So for my writers out there listening in, if you have written your masterpiece and now you need some assistance moving it, well, you got to contact Writers Branding. People, I'm telling you, they're one of the best in the business to do it. This is what they specialize in. So head on over to writersbranding.com today and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help move your creative endeavors. And listen, it is a true pleasure to have Dr. Yurvati here on the line. First and foremost, not only because he's a reoccurring guest. I mean, last time he was here, we talked about his book, Wet My Hands, and it was such an eye-opening experience. But now his other book, as I mentioned, is a continuation. So if you were with me on the last journey, you're going to want to stick with me for this one because it is a remarkable true story of his unbelievable journey on how he went from being at the top of his career, the top of his game, as a skilled surgeon to all of a sudden becoming a patient himself. Now, that is where Wet My Hands started. This to me is a continuation of that journey and how that progression has gone, but also adds in his wife who also became a patient herself. So you're going to learn about both of their stories as well as with this one. This to me, Dr. Yurvati wanted to add in another section. Add in another chapter that's going to give you as the reader some of his most interesting cases. Photos, there's direct insights. I'm telling you, this is something that's going to give you a bird's eye view of some of the most compelling aspects of the medical field. And as someone who, I dabbled in the medical field when I was much younger, I had some desires to go into it, but my wife currently is a physician and she comes home, man, and she is just filled with stories. You are all in for a treat. Sit back and strap in. Dr. Yurvati, first and foremost, welcome back to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How you doing?
All right. Thank you, Benji. I really appreciate coming back, and I appreciate you talking about how I transitioned into the second book.
Mm-hmm.
I continue my journey. Since last time we talked, I had to have both shoulders replaced. Due to the steroids kind of chewing into the bone.
Wow.
So that's been an experience, and some other complications that have occurred kind of down the road, but we're still here pushing on. My wife, she's hanging in there, a little more problem because of the stroke, a little more dementia.
Yeah.
So it's taking, a little toll and, a lot more patience with her. So it's an interesting experience that you bring up, going from, being an international, nationally known cardiothoracic surgeon, and then suddenly, boom, now you're a patient.
Yeah.
Now I got to sit out in the waiting room and wait, and I get irritated when doctors are late because I always wanted to be on time when I had patients and, those things. But I appreciate you bringing me back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, Dr. Yurvati, this is compelling stuff to no end. I do want to quickly go into this aspect of, listen, this to me is going to be the anchors. That's really what we're going to focus on today. But for our listening audience members that happen to miss the previous interview, I don't want to go into a full description of Wet My Hands, but let's start off by talking about what caused that initial transition between you being a surgeon to becoming a patient. What happened?
Yeah, so a couple things happened. I thought I had ruptured a disc. I was kind of lifting a lawnmower, and I went to get an MRI, and it was COVID time, so I had to wait till later in the afternoon. So I came up the street to my office. I could hardly make it. And so when I went back for the MRI, the radiologist came out, who I've known for 20 years. And I said, "So, Paul, how bad is that ruptured disc?" He said, "Dude, you got metastatic cancer. You got cancer in your vertebral body. It's all chewed up." I was like devastated.
Wow.
I immediately texted and sent images to one of the oncologists I knew, because I did a lot of cancer surgery, lung cancer surgery, and, the rest is history. That was when I turned 65. But it was totally destroyed, and I've had multiple surgeries. So I decided to write a book. At first, I thought I'd write about what it takes to become a heart surgeon. Then I said, you know what? Let me do my life.
Yeah.
Let me start with how it started, how I met my wife, how she was the anchor that got me to where I am, about her massive stroke. And actually, I saved her life by knowing what to do to get her intervention, and then me. And so the story's continuing. I'm still here. Right now, the chemo's off. I've been off chemo now for almost not quite a year. Scans look pretty good. Labs look good. So we're hanging in there, which is pretty remarkable for this disease. So, I just praise God for that, and continue to move on. Book 2, this to me, that comes from my trainer, who would put his hand out and say, "This to me," and the tech would give him the knife blade to start the case. I thought, what a great title to give the book. And as you stated, Benji, it continues the story of what's going on medically. And then I put in a whole section about cases that I've done that were most interesting, difficult, other surgeons didn't want to touch, where you have to think out of the box. So I don't want to give away too much, but it's in there. There's photographs and pictures and descriptions. And I think people will be amazed, say, how did Dr. Yurvati come up with that idea?
Well, Dr. Yurvati, listen, this is not where I wanted to go initially, but after saying that, how do I not ask? I have to look in a little further. The interesting cases, that already is just whetting my appetite. But then you're talking about, coming up with these things out of left field. This almost strikes me as an episode of House, right? From that show years ago with those medical practitioners, and how they would just find some things like a needle in a haystack to cure their patients. Well, we don't want to go into too much, but again, I have to ask, can you talk about one of the cases and maybe an interesting thing or interesting answer that you came up to solve the problem?
Oh, yeah. So there is a case I have, and the title of that chapter is called Turtle Man, because the x-ray of the chest shows these little balls in the chest kind of look like turtle eggs. The story is he was a bridge painter and didn't wear a mask, and he got a bacteria that ate up part of his lung. Did surgery on him. He had this infection that we couldn't get cleared up. And I came up with an idea of taking, methylmethacrylate, which is bone cement, and mixing antibiotic with it and tying it on a string and putting it all in the chest. And I did that for a few weeks. And guess what? It cleared up the infection. Then I took the balls out. So the picture is really cool looking, where it looks like there's little turtle balls, eggs in this guy's chest. But it actually worked. As a matter of fact, I was telling my orthopedic shoulder surgery that I had infection in, my one, shoulder replacement. I said, hey, why don't we put some balls in there with antibiotics, and maybe that will help cure it. So, it was innovative.
That is incredible. Listen, I'm at the edge of my seat. I am so excited for this. And I'm really excited to be able to tell my wife about this later on when she comes home. Because oftentimes I don't have as many exciting stories to tell her. But this is going to be at the top of the list. And I know she's going to love it.
Now you've got it. And have her take a look at the book. And I think as she looks at some of the other cases, she'll just be amazed. There's another gentleman. He was probably close to 600 pounds, had this huge mass growing from his thigh, and no one would touch him. And it's called a pseudosarcoma, which is a fancy term for a false cancer. And what it was all this, it was like a 30-pound mass I took off this guy's leg. And once he got healed, he was able then to walk and lose weight. No one would touch him, Wow. But I said, I can help you. I really can help you. And you ask, well, how do you come up with this stuff? Well, in my cardiac training, my chief would say, Albert, sometimes you have to think out of the box. So step back and think out of the box. And just because it's never been done before doesn't mean it can't happen. Mm-hmm. And certainly there's a bunch of cases in there that I think will entertain people.
Absolutely. People, I'm entertained already. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's YurvatiBooks.com. Head on over there today, pick up your copies of This to Me. While you're at it, get the other book, which is technically the first in the installation. That one's called Wet My Hands, both by Dr. Albert Yurvati. You know, Dr. Yurvati, next question that I'd love to go into. This is going to be a way of kind of paying it forward. Now, you said something when we first began that now that you're on the opposite side of things and you are now a patient, you're starting to recognize certain things with different physicians. And you mentioned, punctuality being one of them. Well, I want to give you this opportunity for our listening audience base out there that happens to be in the medical field. What are some words of advice or maybe some words of wisdom that you can offer them now that you're seeing things from an opposite perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Benji. I've always tried to espouse to my students and residents, go in the room to talk to the patient. You don't stand over the bed. You pull the chair up and sit there and talk to them, especially if you're talking something very serious about, a tumor or suspect cancer or something, or, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That you need to get down there and just get equal with them eye to eye. What I really hate is when doctors come in the room, they stand halfway across the room at the door and say, hey, how you doing? This and that. And, no plan. They don't explain anything to you and off they go. And I've always not liked that. The other thing is I'm certified by the Institute of Healthcare Improvement as a CPPS, Certified Professional Patient Safety. Mm-hmm. I took this rigorous course and a certification exam. So I'm really in tune to patient safety and looking for all the things that can occur that could be avoided to prevent problems. And let me tell you, I have identified a lot as a patient, and I put together we have a course for the students on this, and I talk to them about what it's like to be a patient and all these near misses and things. And let me tell you, the students are just absolutely amazed, and I'm hoping that will influence them.
Yeah. I love both things that you've said, Dr. Yurvati, but I really love that first part. Very simplistic, but goes a long way, I believe. I believe, Benji. I mean, that's part of the thread of me and how I interact and so forth, because, like I said, you do that eye to eye and there's a different connection. Many times I did drawings. I would draw on the sheet, showing them different to help explain to them, because I wanted them to really understand what they're going through, what we're going to do, what kind of surgery we're going to do, those things. And I always wanted to be sure that everyone had their questions answered. Yeah. I really hated when, a doctor comes and there's no plan. I always want to make sure people had a plan. We're going to do this and this and this. And now I'm learning that, boy, I'll tell you what, a lot of providers just don't do that. Mm-hmm. And it's very frustrating when you go, when are we going to get out of here? What's next? When can I go home? Those kind of things. So You're right, Benji. You got to get down face to face instead of standing over and hovering over like your superior. Absolutely. Dr. Yurvati, transitioning here, I know that since the last time you were on our network discussing your other book, Wet My Hands, you've been a busy little bee, right? I mean, you've attended different book festivals, a London Book Fair, and also the LA Book Fair as another one. But talk to us a little bit more about what it is that you're doing to get these books off the ground and different events that you have done, as well as maybe other ones coming up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the London Book Fair was my first one. It was a great experience. As a matter of fact, a mother and daughter came up and, the daughter read the back of the book and said, hey, Mom, look, he grew up in Allentown, PA. And the mother said, God, I live like 20 miles north of you. It was like unbelievable here in London, Yeah. And then in LA, it was a great interaction of different people. Some other authors came up. People were very intrigued to hear the story about a surgeon then transitioning to be a patient. So there are great experiences. I'm going to be doing the Miami Book Fair in November. And I've been also taking some of the things to my talks. I'm going to talk to anesthesia organization, a family medicine organization, about what it's like to be a patient, as a physician to being a patient. So I'm trying to get the word out. Oh, the other thing here is exciting. Stay tuned. I'm working on book 3.
That's really the one that I was getting to, right? I was hoping that we were going to be pushing into that. Dr. Yurvati, this is amazing, man. I'm thoroughly impressed, as I always have been, right? The first meeting with you, what you've done by not only your career, but also since this circumstance of becoming a patient, but how your approach has been. I'm going to say your approach has been really level-headed, and I'm sure that has not been the case in every aspect, right? Because I think just naturally, when we are dealing with any catastrophic occasion, or even something that may not seem catastrophic, or may not actually be catastrophic, although being the dramatic people that we are, sometimes we make it that way. But you have been able to persevere through so much. And I know that every day is a new journey, and it is by no means over. But you are continuing to stay afloat, continuing to push through and continuing to fight. So not only are your books wonderful resources to just get an insight into your life, not only are they wonderful resources for physicians or for patients, but they're also messages of inspiration and messages of hope and really the courage of just fighting and not giving up. And I think that's something that really makes your books and makes you as the writer someone that we deem to be a person of distinction. It truly is a pleasure, as it always has been. Dr. Yurvati, this has been a wonderful delight. As we close out here, my final question to you, is there anything that we haven't yet discussed today that you really want to make sure to plug?
Yeah. One of our psychologists told me when I got cancer, they said, hey, what you need to do is you need to reinvent yourself. And so I became an author. And the idea was, she said, you reinvent yourself so cancer can't recognize you. And, I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. I don't want cancer to recognize me. I'm a writer, and so I think that's a great inspirational thing.
This book is something magnificent that has so much to offer. You know where you gotta go. I'm gonna say it for you again. It's Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble. It's YurvatiBooks.com. Head on over there today. Pick up copies of This to Me. While you're at it, get the other book, which is technically the first in the installation. That one's called Wet My Hands. Get it as a gift for someone else, because this book is so much larger than a literary creation. At its foundation, that's what it is. But this book is an education. This book is going to give you insight. Dr. Yurvati, this has been a true pleasure. Man, I really do mean this, an absolute honor. Thank you very much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Benji, I appreciate it. Thank you again. This has been great. Second time around. Look forward to talking to you in the future.